item on our agenda is the project status of the wastewater management plan. Mr. Clark?
Wastewater plan was in the middle school back in June. We had a public hearing that actually we ran out of time and continued it. And what I wanted to do was kind of update you tonight. We received quite a bit of feedback at that public hearing, much more than we received at any time in the 7 years we've been going through this process. And a number of issues came up that we were asked to go back and take a deeper look at. The reason the committee's not with me tonight is a lot of this stuff focused on DPW and our consultant type questions as opposed to committee type questions. So I was just going to run through kind of where we were and where we are. At the public hearing, the wastewater committee had presented a plan with an 80-20 recommended betterment split. And if you recall, the cost to the properties being bettered was about $1,496 per year, whereas the cost to the average non-bettered taxpayer was $91 a year. We were asked to go back and take a look at alternative splits. We actually had done much of that legwork prior to that meeting and have kind of a range of splits ranging from a 50-50 split to 100% zero split, where the town doesn't absorb any of the cost and only the better properties absorb all of the cost. What we're planning to do, and I'm going to go through quite a bit of data here, but what we're planning to do is ask you to come before you guys in about a month's time, probably early November, late October, and provide a more detailed explanation of all of this. It possibly would be the continuation of that public hearing we were talking about, because it's taken us a while to gather all this information, so I'm not going to go into specific details unless you want me to at this point. But so we have those alternative splits. One of the questions that came up was, what are other towns charging for betterments? We've done a study of about 30 other communities that have charged sewer betterments. In some cases we're looking apples to apples. In some cases we're comparing apples to oranges. Obviously a lot of towns with sewer betterments are building on an existing infrastructure. They already have a wastewater treatment plant. They already have some type of collection system, and some of their betterment costs are going to extend sewers into parts of towns that aren't sewered. North Reading, obviously, we're not in that situation. We're going from nothing to try to get up to speed. So where our numbers fall in relation to some of those other numbers has to be taken with a grain of salt. Another thing relative to cost we were asked to look at was go back and look at alternative funding sources. We had done some of this in advance of that meeting as well, but we've gone back to look at public works, economic development grants, some of the community development grants, 319, which are the stormwater grants. Not a whole lot of money out there. We were talking a $40 million project. Some of the 319 grants, which we likely would be eligible for, fall into the $100,000 to $200,000 range. So there's not a whole lot of opportunity to pull those costs down significantly, but we are again seeking other money sources. The second issue had to do with the implementation of the plan. Our recommended plan, if you remember, we had 5 contracts, where the first contract was building the wastewater plant and some of the initial infrastructure. The second phase of that plan, we were actually going up into the Martins Pond neighborhood and picking them up, subsequently going to Town Center and out to Concord Street to pick up some of those plans. The sewer betterment charge that developed, which that 80-20 split was about almost $20,000 per single family home under that plan. We're actually asked to go back and look at, are there alternative methods we could implement this program in that might be able to drive down those betterment costs, especially to some of the residential people that would be bettered. And we've gone back and looked at actually rephasing the project so that we actually would construct a wastewater treatment plant, some of the initial infrastructure, then try to pick up most of the commercial areas, the Main Street area and out Concord Street. Try to identify specifically what are the costs related to that particular development. Rather than coming forward and asking for the entire $40 million at one lump, ask for the money to do that as kind of a phase once we had that infrastructure, then come back and look to actually implement the last two contracts, which pick up most of the residential area, going out into the Marks Pond area and the town center area. What that does in the phase one contract, it actually drives the EDU cost up for the people being bettered, more of the commercial properties. And then in the phase two, which is the more residential, it actually drives down the betterment costs to those properties being bettered. I can go into some specifics on that. It's up, up to you how much detail you'd like tonight. I'll go into capacity was the third major issue we had. As you recall, we have an answer for capacity, but it was a fairly long and lengthy and complicated answer. We decided to step back and kind of really quantify the capacity issue. We've met with the Hillview Commission. We've identified a wooded property between the 7th and 8th fairways on the Hillview property that looks very promising for some additional wastewater discharge capacity. They were very interested in at least allowing us to come in and test that property, which we're looking to do within the next month to kind of give us an idea of exactly how much water we could put in the ground there. The benefit to the Hillview is the state's come out with reuse regs that the quality we're going to be treating the water to, the water could then be used in the spring and summer and fall months to actually irrigate the golf course. It would be pretty beneficial to them. They've been through some limitations in how much water they can draw to irrigate through the state's water management permit, and they're really looking for an additional source of water. So this could really be a very complementary type situation. Obviously, we still have the capacity issue during the winter months because we can't get rid of it by irrigating or applying it to the surface. We have to be able to get rid of it still in the winter months. So that brings us back. We still have that ultimate need, but the Hillview could potentially answer a big portion of that. We've also gone back. We mentioned in the past the post office has a groundwater discharge permit, and we'd actually like to take that over, reuse their discharge field to put our water in the ground. There are probably 10 or 11 other discharge permits in town. Two of the bigger existing ones that we're planning to talk to fairly shortly are the Park Colony and the Greenbrier condominiums. They have their own wastewater treatment plants. They're in our proposed service area, and one of the conditions we'd like to strike with them is that becoming part of the town system, we get to reuse and put our highly treated wastewater effluent into the ground on their sites. Just as a note, the post office, Park Colony, and Greenbrier combined have about a capacity of just under 100,000 gallons a day. Pretty significant numbers. One of the other issues we were asked to look at was go back to the issue of what if we don't put it in the ground in North Reading. As you remember from the very beginning of the process, because of the stress nature of the Ipswich River Basin, we were asked to try to keep the wastewater local, not export any of it from the basin. We have, because of a number of issues, gone back, and we're asking our consultants to look at the MWRA issue again, both from a water and a sewer standpoint. If we were to be allowed to connect a pipe to the MWRA to get rid of the sewer and potentially offset that with a water purchase from MWRA. It's a complicated issue. We're on the, Reading and Wilmington are the extreme northern end of their service area for water and sewer. The MWRA infrastructure comes to the other side of those towns. It comes to the south end of Reading, it comes to the south end of Wilmington. So we have buying costs with MWRA, we have our own infrastructure we'd have to construct, and then we have infrastructure through other communities that we have to construct in order to make that happen. But we've asked our consultants to go back and take a look at that issue. Maybe a longer term plan than a 5-year, maybe more of a 20-year plan to look at that. The other issue that's come up is what about discharging directly to the surface water in either Ipswich River or Mark Brook. To my knowledge, there aren't any current wastewater discharges into the Ipswich River Basin, certainly not this far up into the watershed. It's something that we're not ruling out. We are going back and looking at it, but it's, again, one of those problematic regulatory questions about whether that might be doable. And just to update you on where we are with the Department of Environmental Protection, we've met with them a number of times, most recently in July and August, to discuss the project. We actually filed what's called the PEF, Project Evaluation Form, for them for 2009. This would actually put us on the state for eligible funding for the state revolving fund program, should they look at this as a worthy project. Doesn't mean we have to take money in 2009 this is the short version of it without any of the appendices, but this is what we've been working for the length of the project. It's the needs analysis, it's the discharge capacity, it's the funding mechanisms, it's the, the betterment costs. We've submitted it in pieces to DEP as, say, the hydrogeological capacity of individual sites was identified and verified. We'd submit that piece to DEP to get feedback from them, but this is the first time they've actually seen the entire kind of bound final draft version of that, so that's gone to them. And I'm just going to touch on, there are some changes to the state revolving funding, SRF funding. It's currently a 2% interest loan. They've written in some into the next year's funding mechanism, some wording that actually is, I think it's in there to benefit some of the Cape communities, but it actually could implement us that certain projects would be eligible for 0% funding. We've had some initial conversations with DEP whether our project might be eligible for that, and they've given us a positive indication. It's only portions of the project that will be relative to the treatment plan and the discharge because of what we're trying to do here. But that's certainly some good news. And then just quickly on the other issues, we've talked with the Gutierrez people, the development of the other half of the Berry property. As you're probably aware, they've recently changed their marketing company and are trying to market that property pretty actively. Again, going through what we are economically, I'm not sure how quickly that might turn around. They still would like to be a customer of the town as opposed to being in front of the town, at least in terms of the wastewater, rather than be in front of the town and have to build their own wastewater treatment plant, which eventually would give us 3 wastewater treatment plants in a little half-mile circle radius out there. And another issue, Weston and Sampson, the initial contract we had with them dates back to 2001. They've been kind of living on air for an extended period in the past, and with some additional work to go back and look at all these items. And we do have an addendum to that contract with them, and we're looking to get approval to do that work. And then just to quickly go through what we envision the next steps being in the process, we have the hydro-geo testing out on the Hillview Golf Course. We have a work plan into DEP that they have to sign off on, but we envision getting out there in the next month or so. That involves is actually drilling 4 wells on the site to monitor groundwater levels. It's also digging what they call a test pit and doing what they call a double ring infiltrometer test, where you actually measure how much water you can push into the ground. Then you do a computer model where you try to put more and more water subsequently into the ground until you get to a point where you're changing the plane where that water breaks out of the ground and actually raises the level of the wetlands in the area. We expect to have all that done within a month or so. We're probably going to make a quick report to town meeting this fall. We'd like to meet with you again in the late October, early November time frame to kind of give you more details on this. And then we'd like to do additional outreach through the following winter months, and hopefully we'd like to be back before town meeting, possibly as early as April of next year.
Thank you, Mark. A couple of questions. On the Hillview site, this additional contractor, Weston and Sampson, is required to cover what you've talked about in terms of doing the additional studies at Hillview. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's actually 5 additional tasks that we've asked Weston and Sampson to take a look at. Some of them they've actually already started on. One has to do with the project, that EEF project evaluation home to DEP. That's relatively low money. The additional financial alternatives that we've asked them to look at, the MWRA, water and sewer alternatives, gone into great detail, so that's in the addendum to Hillview. And then as we go forward, we're into our 7th or 8th year, just additional public outreach.
And as I recall, I got a brief look at the request back a week or 2 ago. Is it around $100,000?
89, just under $90,000.
Just under $90,000, and it'll be funded from the balance of the $750,000 we received from Lincoln Properties for wastewater.
Right. It doesn't take up that whole balance, but it would be